Well, it's my great honour to introduce our next speaker, who's really one of the pioneers in the new energy movement. He's someone who has been a founder of the New Energy Congress, an organisation that brings together some of the leading pioneers who explore the feasibility of new energy technologies. He's been a consultant for many years with Fortune 500 companies on the feasibility of new energy technologies. He's the president of the New Energy Movement, a leading organisation, presents and helps generate public awareness of these new energy technologies, which are very significant for transforming life on our planet as we know it. Some of the earlier presentations covered some of the physics and the health implications of this. I'm sure Joel Garbon will introduce to us just the profound significance all these technologies hold for us as individuals. And most recently, he's been active in drafting an Energy Innovation Act for the US Congress, which is being debated and being presented to members of Congress as we speak. So this is not just exploring feasibilities of new technologies, it's actually looking at how to actively develop these and get Congress on side and supporting these. So with that, I want to welcome Joel Garbon.
Wow, what a privilege. What a privilege and what a beautiful spot to host a conference. I live in Portland, Oregon, and so to come from the gloom of there, which sometimes is continuous until June, to come back to the Big Island after a 20-year absence is just a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. So thank you all. You know, it's interesting that I've prepared a presentation, and I've prepared dozens and dozens of PowerPoint presentations in my professional career. But I really don't like using them. I'd much rather interact directly and from the heart. And so I will use some slides here because I think it helps to convey a few things. But even though it says up here, we're going to talk about a grassroots movement, and we're going to talk about some new energy legislation that's being proposed to the US Congress. Really what this is about is two things. It's relationships, because that's what really provides us meaning in our lives. And it's about a really compelling thought. And that thought is, ideas are strengthened as shared. Ideas are strengthened as they're shared. And so I hope that you see over the next hour that those themes of relationships and sharing ideas is very, very critical to what we're trying to do with the grassroots movement at this very prescient time on our planet. And this isn't just going to be me saying something. You're going to have a chance at the end of this to provide some dialogue back, so we're going to have some time for questions at the end. You know, Leonard, when he came up earlier, he talked about music, how powerful music is, and had lots of science behind it. And I'd like to put music in the context of inspiration and relationships. And so I'll tell you a real quick little story here. As we were getting ready to host our first New Energy Movement conference in Portland in the fall of 2004, I kept thinking about, gee, how do we include music in this? How do we appeal to people's souls with something from the arts? And I'm not really musically inclined. I mean, I can maybe hum a tune here. Did we? Okay, back there. But as far as being a musician or an artist, I'm really nothing of a sort. But I happened to hear this gentleman, Sean Galloway, a few months before our conference was to occur. And he played this song that so touched my soul and my heart, and to me spoke so clearly about what this movement is all about, that I just said, please, 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 tell me you will accept my invitation to come and be the musical artist at our conference. And he's like, yeah, baby! Send me the ticket, I'm coming. So he came from Nashville and came on out, and we've been great friends ever since. And so I offer a gift to you from Sean in the form of a DVD, and I think that it's really going to move you. Thank you, Sean. Sean also was kind and creative enough to create a theme song for the New Energy Movement, and it's by the same name, the New Energy Movement. And at the end, you'll be able to hear the soundtrack of that. And we have some of his DVDs at our table out there, or the CDs, excuse me, of his music out there that you'll be able to buy if you'd like. This was part of the relationship I was speaking to you about. Here's one man who just provided an opening, touches hundreds of people just like that, just because we're willing to engage that relationship. And for me, that's what all of this is about. You know, I told so many of my colleagues in the New Energy Movement that, look, I don't know where the technology is going to go. I don't know what the ultimate outcome is, but if I make one friend, it will all have been worth it. And I've made so many already. Make a lot of friends. You know, I want to thank all of you. See, I don't think it's a stretch to want to give yourself in the spirit of service for the children of people you'll never meet. And I know each one of you has that spirit inside you, or you would not be here. What a privilege for me to even be here. To follow these visionaries like Len and Nassim and so many more to come. What a privilege. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My beloved Susan is here. Please stand up for a second, Susan, so people can see how beautiful you are. And it's not just an exterior. Susan's a remarkable woman, and she reminds me frequently that, Joel, you tend to have your male side dominate, and you need to have some balance. And for some reason, I awoke at 4 a.m. this morning, and just was wide awake, and I laid there for probably an hour. Then I leaned over and I kissed her and I said, you know, baby, I think I have to go to the ocean. So I walked out early this morning, made my way across the lava bed right out there until I could almost touch the sea. And there's a prayer that I've said for years that I think helps to integrate for me the mother aspect of the creative spirit, because I tend to forget that side at times. And maybe it's because I tend to resonate more with the father aspect. It may be because my earthly father is a saint, and I tell people that a lot because he is. And so as I was out sitting on one of those lava rocks, it just really struck me. I said, as far as the physicality of this planet, the freshest earth is right here under our feet. this living island, this breathing, growing, being spawned out of the fiery belly of God right here. And I was so privileged to sit on some of her freshly solidified lava right there this morning. And so saying that prayer, that helps to balance that feminine aspect of creative spirit, had a little more meaning this morning. Thank you, beautiful earth, for the sustenance that she provides our physical experience. And may we learn to nurture her and cherish her, and may her wounds heal quickly. I could not put that in a PowerPoint presentation. I knew something that had to come from the heart. Each of us who are at the core of the new energy movement loves this planet dearly and passionately. And you see the passion on Len's face and in his voice, and in Nassim's face and in his voice, that comes out of their hearts for their endeavors. And we feel the same thing. We're very kindred with each of these visionaries. And each of us know what the problems are on our earth. We're beleaguered by a lot of great challenges right now. An incredible time to be alive. If you have the spirit of service in you, what an incredible time to be alive. This is the real stuff. This is the real stuff. I'm not going to go over all the problems. We see them on the headlines. We know what they are. We know we try to distract ourselves from these all the time. I don't want to think about global warming. I'm tired of hearing the news. I don't want to think about nuclear proliferation because I've got kids and grandkids. I can't even think about it. I don't want to think about all the stuff about political nonsense and the resource wars and mercury in the air, soil, water, and species die-offs. And I don't want to think about it. I'd rather be distracted by American Idol. And you know what? That's refreshing too, because music heals, and music is a real source of joy. I pick on them a little bit because it's, so out in front of the pop consciousness of, especially. But we do tend to distract ourselves very easily. But it's time for us to be mature. At times I speak in parables, and I'll tell you one. An arsonist came into a neighborhood, and he set fire to a house. And the neighbors saw the flames, and they rushed out their front doors and ran to their neighbor's house. They said, "Fire, fire, get out of the house, get out of the house." And they rescued their neighbors from the burning house. And they all got together and formed a line and took buckets and hoses hooked up to the fire hydrants, and they put the flames out. Real sense of community. And then they sat down and they said, okay, we're going to rebuild this house too. We're going to rebuild this house. Some of the other neighbors captured the arsonist, brought him right in front of the father of that house he had set fire to. And everyone was wondering what type of punishment is going to be inflicted on the arsonist. And that very, very wise man saw the fear in the eyes of the one who lit the match. And he said, "Brother, I forgive you. In fact, I'd like you to teach my children and the children of this neighborhood about the danger of playing with fire. Please come and help me to rebuild this house so it's even more glorious than before." Now, how many fires do you think that man set after that? That's the type of healing that we need right now. Right now. Because we all have been setting the fires. We've all been setting the fires. I've set them. You've set them. The obstructionists who have interfered with the release of breakthrough energy technologies have set them as well. They're no different than us, and they're part of our family. Len expressed it very well early on. Forgiveness is a wonderful step. But seeing that we all are of the same family, that we are all ultimately one, is the sovereign balm for this and for all of our problems on this planet. Technology is not the savior. Technology is not the savior. Technology is a temporary crutch. But it's an important crutch. Just like if you break a leg and you put those physical crutches under your arms and you start moving about, your healing response is faster. And you will come to where you are self-reliant, again, capable of using both those legs. But the temporary crutch was important in facilitating that healing. The technologies that we are looking for are a crutch. They are a bridge to buy us time on this planet to get to that point where we can do these things with the power of our own minds. I believe that so thoroughly in my being. The technology revolution needs to evolve concurrently with the spiritual evolution. We can't have one without the other. If we just have technology, we probably hasten a doomsday scenario, physically speaking, because we will not have the maturity or wisdom to exercise it responsibly. If we just have the spiritual, there's a great temptation to stay in the cave. Take great indulgence in the bliss of the shell we can build around ourselves with just that spiritual indulgence. But yet we find ourselves here having a material experience. And that requires us to get out of the cave. When we've had some of that awakening, you get out there and you put things into action. Just like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, the Buddha, Jesus, on and on. You get out of the cave and you go do something. And you may not know what the outcome is, but you know what your heart's intent is, and you know you're doing your best to be aligned with the universal forces that would prod us along to evolution. Some of the environmentalists who get a lot of press don't like the idea of new energy. They like to think that, nope, we should get rid of all the cars, we should walk or bike everywhere, maybe we shouldn't live in houses, maybe we should dig holes in the ground, live there, go to caves or whatever. And I hear that. I hear that. They demonize high technology. And they think, well, you know, we're just going to burn up the planet faster if we indulge one of these breakthrough energy technologies. And I say, you know what? We are not regressive beings. We are meant to advance towards something bigger and better. Nassim talked about lifting off the surface. You betcha, baby. You betcha, because I want to take one of those rides. And I think my kids would like to as well. Although they don't want me to go alone. They told me that. I have two daughters who are part of my inspiration for what I do. Well, the technology can be used responsibly, I believe. Technology always lags a bit behind the greatest wisdom for its application. And we see that with everything. I mean, nuclear power is probably the best one. It's done some good measure of benefit for us, but yet there's so many things about it that we misused, that it's a bit of a scourge. That could change in time. Certainly the remediation technologies that could come out to take care of from our nuclear power would be a great thing, a great boon. But we're going to move forward. We're going to move forward because we're not going to stay stagnant. We have to move on things soon. I had the privilege of hearing NASA's chief science officer from the Langley, Virginia, speak last September at a conference at which Tom Vallone was co-host. Actually, he was the primary host with Integrity Research Institute, of which Tom is the president. And Tom was very gracious in inviting New Energy Movement to be co-host of that conference. And Dennis Bushnell from NASA had a chance to speak and present his views on what's required for new energy. And let me put it to you straight. He's a gloom and doomer. He's not real optimistic that we're going to get our act together in time. And he proposed something along the lines of what we ought to do is we ought to irrigate all the world's deserts with seawater, with salt, and plant vast plantations of salt-tolerant vegetation that we harvest and turn into biofuels, ethanol or biodiesel. And that was his number one idea. And there were a few others mixed in there, but that was his idea. Someone asked him after his presentation, well, what if that doesn't work? What if that measure comes up short? Then what? His reply was terrifying. And I'm not even going to tell you what it was. But a ripple went through this room of about 150 physicists, electrical engineers, hardcore science community. A ripple went through that room. I was like, what? Then when I heard Dr. James Hansen, NASA's chief climatologist, he's the one who's gotten a lot of about blowing the whistle on the current administration about suppressing his climate change data. Well, to hear him speak directly, he doesn't think we have a lot of time. He thinks we have maybe 10 years to turn things around. If not, all bets are off. All right? And see, that flies directly in the face of so many of these projections that we hear about, oh, we got to do such by 2050 or by 2100. And it's totally out of sync with what the scientists really say. That was very, very sobering to me. I'm trained as a scientist. My background is mostly in the chemical arena, and I had a 2-decade career as a consultant in the pulp and paper and chemical industries. Not real favored by the environmental community, and I can see why. Let me tell you this, seeing a clear-cut mountainside, and there's a lot of them where I live in Oregon, it tears my heart to pieces. And for the time, as I looked at the devastation wrought by the chemical industry and the paper industry, I thought, I can't stay in this. I can't stay in this. I don't want to be part of this. And then a thought occurred to me at a certain point that, you know what? If everyone who cares leaves, nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. And I came to have a great appreciation then for people who stay inside the machinery of mechanisms that are doing great destruction. There's many of these people within our intelligence communities. Inside NSA, CIA, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you name the three-letter intelligence agency. Within our military. Within large corporations. Within all kinds of NGOs and you name it. There's all kinds of people of high intent who are working within the machinery of mechanisms that are causing great devastation. Thank God for those people staying in there and not bailing out just because it's painful to see what's going on and because they really care. They stay. My exit came, it built up because I felt a calling, just simply a personally profound experience, which I'm sure each of you have had. But in this case, in my, how can I best be of service to this planet using what I've learned? How can I best be of service? Asked that question for a while, and finally, some communication occurred that said, well, you're going to help bring about a new form of energy on this planet. I'm like, okay. Like solar energy? And all I can say is this smiling face that just went, nope. And so that launched me into this new endeavor. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background of some of the people. But first I want to give you a little picture here. This is essentially the energy pie for the United States. And if you look at our energy portfolio, you see in white we have coal, about 25%, natural gas, about 25%, petroleum here in this kind of gray-green. You add those up, you get 86% of our energy portfolio is contributed by fossil fuels. You look at the renewable portion there in the green, that's just above the red piece of pie, which represents nuclear power. But the renewable energy piece, which is, predominantly hydroelectric, and we have a lot of hydroelectric along the Columbia River Basin where I live in Portland. It's not pretty. The Columbia used to be this incredibly roaring, rich, wild river. They said you could walk across the salmon on their backs. They were so thick. Incredible, incredible. They pull out these 12 feet long sturgeon. The Indians considered the most rich fishing grounds on the planet, and all kinds of Northwest indigenous peoples' rituals and community bonding were around those salmon. But they're threatened because there's so many dams in the Columbia drainage and elsewhere all along the West Coast. So that's most of the renewable power is coming from hydroelectric, and then we have some biomass, and that's largely produced in industrial facilities where they're burning waste like wood waste to produce heat and power to use in their own process. The paper industry does a lot of that, and the chemical industry does a lot of that. And we have a little bit of solar and geothermal. We've got a little bit of these biofuels like ethanol and biodiesel. They fall into the biomass component here. But look how tiny that slice is, 6%, not very much. Now, with all the great attention that we're getting to renewable energy and people becoming aware of the climate change issue, and I got to give credit to Al Gore, and I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, and New Energy Movement is not about politics. It has no favorites there. But I got to give credit to that man, Al Gore. He has really helped to open up the consciousness as far as looking at the planet with new eyes and seeing what's going on. Well, now I'm going to tell you something else. In December of 2006, just months ago, the Projection and Statistics Agency of the Department of Energy, which is called the Energy Information Administration, put out their 25-year forecast for what the energy pie is going to look like for the United States 2030. Okay? What do you see here right now in the year, this was the year 2005 here. All right? What you see right now is fossil fuels, which are coal, natural gas, and petroleum, 86% of our energy consumption. All right? Of the petroleum portion, some 2/3 is imported right now. The projection for the year 2030 is 86% fossil fuels, sound familiar? And 2/3 reliance on imported oil. It's just that there's going to be some shift toward more coal, less oil. Coal. Oh, that's clean, that's progressive. You know, is it amazing to you when you consider the remarkable advances in telecommunications? How many generations of cell phones have there been now? 10, 15? The remarkable advances in computing. That we all know about that. Remarkable advances in medical diagnostics, in pharmaceutical applications. On and on and on. Technology has progressed in all these other areas that are so pervasive. But we're still burning coal. We're still burning coal. What's going on here? I mean, isn't this so obvious? This is by intent. This is by intent. This is manipulated, and we all know that. We feel that. We know that. So how do we break out of that now that we just face that fact? How do we take the information, the desire, the prescient time of awakening that we find ourselves in right now, and the maturity to now want to do something? Dr. Brian O'Leary is a man who had a vision and still has a vision. Brian was recruited and trained in the Apollo program as an astronaut in the late 60s. And he was to be in the first manned mission to Mars, which was being planned at that time. And then that got scrubbed shortly after Brian entered the program. LBJ defunded that program. And Brian left NASA and went into lecturing at many Ivy League universities. And Brian at a certain point had his own personally profound experience where suddenly he's like, you know what, there's something else that conventional science doesn't explain. And it has to do with many of the topics we're talking about here. So he went on a mission to go around the world and investigate these claims of unusual scientific phenomenon, whether they be incidents of paranormal activity, whether they might be spoon bending by Uri Geller, or you know, the manifestation of the Vibhuti ash that came out of Sai Baba's hands, or the claims of new energy inventors who said that they had come upon remarkable technology that would produce more energy than was apparently required to initiate whatever reaction was occurring in that mechanism. So he did a thorough investigation of this, and it lasted for over 10 years. And he came away just thoroughly convinced that breakthrough technologies and energy have existed. They are real. They've been suppressed, at times ruthlessly, and it's caused loss, human loss, not just to the inventor in some cases, but but to our whole civilization. We've had our advancement retarded as a result of this. So Brian became very passionate about this, founded several organizations that were largely technical orientation, and so the audience would be pretty much the physics community, the hard techie community. And as he would go year to year hosting these conferences, he realized that the demographic was not growing. It was staying confined to this narrow slice of fringe science, if you will, even though the room was filled with these brilliant people who really care at their times. But it wasn't getting out into the mainstream community. So finally, he said, you know, there's got to be another way. We got to galvanize people in a whole different way. And so when I had a chance to meet him for the first time in the spring of 2003, and I'd wanted to meet him for years, just like I've wanted to meet Leonard Horowitz after reading his book, The Healing Codes, when that first came out. I read it, I want to meet this guy someday. And today was the day. And Nassim, who I've heard about from some other colleagues, like, oh, Joel, you have to meet Nassim, this guy. Oh, well, today's that day. So these things come around. Well, Brian was another guy on the list. So I went and introduced myself to him when he gave a local lecture in Portland. And I said, Brian, I want to help you. He talked about forming a grassroots movement, a citizen movement, to spread the word about the intense and urgent need to support the research and development of breakthrough energy technologies and all the implications that goes along with that. That it would address the geopolitical, environmental, socioeconomic aspects of an energy revolution that would power our planet and provide some physical means to address these physical problems. It can't address the spiritual problem, which is largely a matter of the separation-mindedness that we all find ourselves in. But it can provide the crutch to buy us some time. And I said, Brian, sign me up. And he said, I accept. So, how would you like to be on this board? Together with Alden Bryant. And Alden Bryant, many regard as the one of the grandfathers of the U.S. ecology movement. He started an organization called the Earth Regeneration Society years ago that was focused on restoration of our soil, our water, our forests, and also he was on the leading edge of the fact that climate change was occurring. And Alden actually initiated the series of communications that spawned the Rio Climate Summit, and that then spawned the Kyoto Accord. Alden was behind that. He didn't get any credit for it, but there's always that spark. The spark comes somewhere. In this case, it was Alden. Howard Jeter was also one of the first executives. Howard was, he and Alden both World War II veterans. Howard, an activist for women's rights, a lifelong educator as well, just an incredible gentleman. He's on his deathbed now, but I've had the privilege to still see him and let him know how much we appreciate him. Andrew Mount was one of our original board members as well, and Andrew was one of the ones who spoke of Nassim to me. So Brian asked me to be part of this. Whoops. Give me just a second here. Part of something that we decided to call the New Energy Movement. And the New Energy Movement is established as a 501c3 nonprofit, and it has an all-volunteer staff. There's no one who's paid in the organization right now, but it was meant to be a true grassroots movement, where once the word gets out there and people feel that they're with information, that they could spread the word, and there's no need for a formal head or a formal leadership of it. I simply said to our board when they asked me to take the helm when Brian left and moved down to Ecuador to continue the work in Latin America. I said, I will do this until clearly it's time for me to do something else. And I hope it happens quickly, because I want there to be leaders everywhere. No head. Just one of these things that just grows. They call them viral organizations in a good sense, because they just spread, they multiply so quickly, and then it's like critical mass, and ideas are strengthened as they're shared. We recognize that the single most highly leveraged opportunity for advancement towards solving complex global problems lies in a transformation of the way human civilization generates and utilizes energy. You see, that motto, I believe, is really true, because there's not a single human need, a physical human need that doesn't have energy at it some way. It's totally vital to the production of our food, the transport of our food, for the pumping systems for our water that gets water to our homes, for transportation, even for fertilizer itself. It comes from natural gas. Herbicides, pesticides, these things generally are from oil. On and on and on. When you think about it, you dig into it. Energy is at the core of everything that we do on this planet. It also is responsible for so much of the haves and have-not syndrome that we have, socioeconomically and geopolitically, and that results in these resource wars. So this is the motto that we came up with, and we were aware that, okay, there are solutions out there. Where are they? Where are they? That's a question I get asked all the time. Okay, Joel, where are they? Show me, put it on the table, show it to me. And I said, I want to do that, and we're working toward doing that. Nikola Tesla, definitely one of the early pioneers. He was working with wireless transmission of electricity way before his time, and he was suppressed. New energy movement, we have as our major priorities to educate the public, educate policymakers, educate the investment community and mainstream science about the need and the urgent need to support the research and development of breakthrough energy technologies. I'll give you just one example. Here in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai, lives one of the pioneers of the cold fusion technology. His name is Roger Stringham. And Roger has a variant of cold fusion called sonofusion. I went to see Roger in February, just a couple months ago, and saw his process, and he's just an incredible man. Brilliant, brilliant. He's probably the most advanced in the cold fusion science. And cold fusion got a bad rap, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But just to let you know, the research of the U.S. Navy from a facility in San Diego, just within the last couple weeks, issued a definitive report that cold fusion is valid science. And that report's available. Didn't make front page news. I don't know why the hell why. Why did that not make the front page? Should have. Problem is, cold fusion was announced in 1989. And it was suppressed. Patents died. The original scientists, Fleischmann and Pons, were essentially ostracized, blackballed from mainstream academia, actually left the country to continue their research. Now they've come back finally. But again, there's the 15 years have gone by, 16, 17, 18 years. Okay, well, Roger's right here in the islands, looking for funding, looking for an opportunity to have his technology benefit the world. But he's a solo researcher with no understudy. He doesn't have 78 years old, very vigorous, brilliant, but no understudy. And so I'm there going, Roger, we gotta have a brain trust here, okay? And I'm gonna try to help you find funding so we can get this going. And that's a conversation I have with a lot of inventors, is I believe in you. I believe in what you're doing. I'm going to try to build a tiger team around you in whatever way I can do that. And that takes resources, folks. They haven't been showing up. There's been a real captive situation here where the venture capital has been going to conventional renewables, wind, solar, and biofuels. But just as I spoke to a group of constituents at a press conference where I was invited to speak alongside Senator Maria Cantwell, a U.S. Senator from the state of Washington. This was in October. And I spoke to her constituents and said, you know, folks, the conventional renewables, biofuels, wind, solar, these are wonderful technologies. They're bridge technologies. They're getting the public dialogue going. People are thinking the right way about this. It's starting to get us think about what renewable means. But they're woefully inadequate to address the problem in time. And I told them why. Explain. Talk to the NASA guys. See what they think. And they're like, we don't have 50 years and 100 years to just do these small incremental approaches. We need something breakthrough. And I'll tell you what, every constituent in that room stood up and applauded. They connected with this. And the senator, not to miss a great opportunity, slides right up here for the photo op. And then that was it. Okay? Became very silent. Maria is actually went to Miami University, graduated a year ahead of me. Well, I went to Miami as well. And I've since spoken to her staff. She is progressive on energy, but was a little bit freaked out when I mentioned the word cold fusion. She's like, is this guy going to embarrass me or what? But when she saw how the audience, just in their guts, they know what the truth is. And so she's like, okay, that was good. Thank you for this guy. Okay. I like to use this. And, you know, the oil age is not exempt. The oil age is not exempt. And of course, just like with any truth movement, at first it's ridiculed, they're a bunch of kooks. Then it's, you know what? These folks can really put a dent in our vested interests. Get rid of them. And then, after the viral experience happens, and the knowledge is out there and it can't be contained, guess what happens? Oh, I invented it first. It's my idea all along. Okay? Well, great. I want everyone to take credit for it. Let's get there. All right? But it takes some things between now and then. I'm getting the high sign here to wrap up, so I'm going to go through some things really quickly here. And first, I want to let you know that part of what we're trying to do is to generate a database of new energy technologies that are publicly viewable, where people can see what's going on. And the New Energy Congress is a separate organization, kind of a sister to New Energy Movement, if you will, that's established to do just that. And if you go to that website, newenergycongress.org, and click on the top 100, you'll get to view what a lot of these technologies are. Sterling Allen is the fellow who's the guts behind New Energy Congress. He's also one of the directors of New Energy Movement. And these are some of the various technologies that you can see and learn about. And there's interviews with the inventors and just all kinds of great stuff that's been cataloged and it's publicly viewable. So you can look at that. The Energy Innovation Act came about because Dennis Kucinich, who's a congressman from Ohio, had met with Brian O'Leary this past September 11th. Interesting timing for that, when Brian was in Washington giving a fiery speech, and said, Brian, can you deliver a draft legislation about new energy that I can use? And, you know, Brian knew that Dennis was going to be doing his presidential campaign again, and and thought, okay, here's a champion within Congress who's going to march forward with this. So Brian calls me up from Ecuador, and he says, Joel, we got this opportunity to now engage the political process here. We've been talking about it for years. We think there's a champion here, and where there's one, we think we can find some more. Help me with this. I go down to Ecuador, and after 5 weeks of doing something I'd never done before, which was write legislation, and with the help of wonderful mentors such as Tom Vallone, who you're going to have the privilege of hearing from tomorrow night at the keynote address. Tom happens to be a director of New Energy as well. And from Gene Manning, another advisor who wrote a book called The Coming Energy Revolution. From Ken Rowan, one of the best science generalists I've ever met, who provides a lot of technical advisory. Here standing alongside Dr. Eugene Malov, who some of you may have known or heard of. He was a real champion of the whole new energy thrust, and was unfortunately murdered a couple months before our first conference in Portland, and he was to be our keynote speaker at that conference. But anyway, I've had the tremendous gift of wonderful mentors such as Tom, and others from the inventor community had said to me what they would like to see in new energy legislation. And so after that, the 5 weeks came out of my cave and said, okay, what do you think? And I got the thumbs up. So this is what the legislation of the Energy Innovation Act of 2007, which is a draft legislation, contains these provisions. It establishes and funds a new Office of Energy Innovation. It establishes an independent and publicly accountable Citizen Oversight Council to monitor the activities of that office, to make sure that obstructionism does not continue to occur at levels like it's happened within the Department of Energy. It authorizes appropriations of $2.25 billion a year for 10 years beginning in 2007. You know what that amounts to, folks? That amounts to a week in Iraq. That amounts to 3 or 4 weeks worth of ExxonMobil profits. And it amounts to less than $8 per U.S. citizen per year. What, a couple lattes at Starbucks? What do you think? Interested? Okay? Yeah. Good. You would think Congress would be too. That's another story. Okay, so the Office of Energy Innovation will be charged with the following task here. Identify and rapidly advance new and unconventional approaches. New and unconventional. And that's well defined within the legislation. Well defined. So they can't default to any of the conventional stuff that already is receiving funding. It accelerates small business early stage R&D of these new and unconventional approaches through a program of awards, a technology prize, for instance, of maybe $10 million, of very substantial grants and loan guarantees. It performs assessments on an initial and biannual basis, so taxpayer dollars are not wasted. These would be reviewed by committees of hard scientists whose minds also are open to breakthrough concepts, to make sure that only the good technologies pass the gate. And it establishes regional research centers and incentives for collaboration among researchers so that you get the tiger team. You get maybe a couple, 2, 3, 4 who are working on the same technical specific area, bring them together instead of as solo scientists, and they actually qualify for a larger amount of funding than if they would individually. Okay, so that recognizes the brain trust. And then collaborate with the DOE on strategies for deployment. Steve Kaplan, our executive director, camped out in Washington, D.C. for 6 weeks in January and February to arrange the first congressional round of introduction of these technologies. So Steve arranged for us to meet with a number of congressmen and senators and their staffers to start introducing our idea here. Tom Vallone was very instrumental in coming in and providing some technical background on this, as was Scott Chubb from the Naval Research Labs. And I'd like to say that we had just a wondrous reception, but it doesn't work that way. As one of the staffers said to me, as I was less than impressed by the very cool reception to this idea, and I have to admit, I know I poured a lot of my heart and soul and time into it, and of course you want, as you know, ideas are strengthened as they're shared. I'm like, oh, my ideas are shared, you know. And the guy says, you know, Joel, every day there is an army of lobbyists coming through here from the fossil fuel and nuclear power, and now a sizable a number of lobbyists for the conventional renewables of wind and solar and biofuels. And you are a blip on the radar screen compared to all that. You don't have a constituency built. Like, okay, constituency, relationships, grassroots movement, new energy movement. We got to talk to some more people. And I'm talking to some more people today. Steve did a real yeoman's job here. He came back exhausted. He went there exhilarated, came back exhausted. Then I said, Steve, just take a break. And he's taken a break since that time because he was so passionately hopeful that we would get the champion. But even Kucinich, who asked for this, backed out. He backed out. I wasn't very happy. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up on an apple farm in Ohio. And here's an Ohio congressman who I've come to admire. And you know what? After I was pissed, and my friends rarely see me really upset because, you know, generally I don't get to that point. I was pissed. Stakes are very high. I've got children in this picture, and you all have family who are being affected by this. I wasn't really interested in hearing more about partial half measures or watering down legislation that we need critically and urgently. I wanted a champion. I wanted the champion who asked for it. But then as I calmed down, I thought, you know what? Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, because if you hadn't we wouldn't even have what we have now. So thank you. I'm just about done here. So, you know, it's not hard to think about what some of the incredible potentials would be for new energy. What would it mean? What kind of world can you envision here? I like what Nassim said about lifting off the surface. Hell yeah, I want to be on that ride. Oh man, head for the stars. New energy would make that possible. All right. What about a guy who loves the forest, who came out of the paper industry, who's tired of seeing clear cuts? Imagine this. How about a helicopter that is powered by a new energy technology, requires no fuel, so there's no cost for fuel, and they could do selective harvesting of only the weak trees. All right? And that meets all the requirements for lumber and paper. So the really good trees grow into mature old-growth forests that much more rapidly with no logging roads, no silting of salmon streams, none of that environmental devastating clear cuts. That's something that I see. That's dear to me. And take down the damn dams. That's dear to me. I want to see what it's like to be able to walk across the backs on salmon across the Columbia River. And I want my kids to see that. Oh man, and I want to see the Native Americans. I want to see them see that. There's something you can do with your time, with your financial resources, with your relationships. We need help. We're an all-volunteer staff. I have a full-time job. Everything related to this, whether it was the legislation or whatever, all after hours. Steve, our executive director, It's not salaried, just took 6 weeks, goes and does that. We've had a few trickles of funding that help us meet some incidental expenses, but I need a full-time paid staff. Plain and simple. If you think this is important, please help us make that come about. Tell your legislators, get off your butts, folks. Stakes are too high. The time is now. With a revolution in energy as the foundation of a renewed and loving stewardship of our planet, we can transform this world into a beautiful and healthy home, full of promise, opportunity, abundance, and peace for all of humanity. That's what we can do. If you want to contact us, this is how. I've got my business cards are out there at our table. You can also support Sean, who donates a portion of the proceeds from sales of his CDs to New Energy Movement, and we have some of those. We only have a few, but you can certainly contact him this way. So, that's my message. I hope some new relationships come out of this. That's what it's all about, and that's what gives our lives meaning. And I hope that an idea was shared to the point that it was strengthened. Thank you.